everyone, welcome. My name is Zubair Altaf Qureshi and I welcome you all to this AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner course that I am having on my YouTube channel. And this is basically the section 3 AWS Cloud Overview. So we will be going through the features, through the terminologies of AWS. And before the section, in section 2 we talked about again the cloud overview, but that was a general explanation of all the clouds, cloud technologies and all the cloud providers actually. So the terms that are used generally in the cloud technology. So I went through that, and now in this section we'll be talking all about AWS cloud features and products, right? So without wasting much time, let's start. I'll be starting with the brief history of Amazon Web Services, how it started and what was the first service that it started, when it started, and all those stuff. So in my next slide you can see, okay, let me go to the next slide. So here you can see, let me go back. Okay, so here you can see that actually this was AWS was launched in 2002, but that was not for public. It was internally launched, and then it was a vision was set by the AWS to go public in 2003 with the services, right? But actually what happened is Amazon SQS was launched publicly in 2004. So first SQS, or you can say Amazon service that was launched was SQS back in 2004. It was simple queuing service, and then it was relaunched in 2006, but the relaunch had other products, features as well. It was the S3 and the EC2, S3 being storage and EC2 being compute, and SQS was also there but with some improvements. And then in 2010, the huge shift of Amazon.com to the AWS infrastructure was done, and it's been to almost 10 years now since Amazon.com is running on the AWS global infrastructure. And in 2015, they actually released the sales figures, and it was back then in 2015 $1.57 billion, which was also a great amount. But then again in 2018, after 3 years, they launched, showed the revenue that was generated was $25 billion. That was almost 15 to 20 times more than back in 3 years, right? And then actually in 2019, the revenue of AWS was $35 billion. I think I mentioned that in the next slides. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is Amazon Web Services today. How it is today, how many features it has, right? So it has over 175 fully featured services, including compute, storage, networking, database, analytics, media services, machine learning, management, mobile, IoT, robotics, AI. They are expanding like never before. And then you have the availability zones, right? So AWS now spans 77 availability zones in 24 geographic regions around the world, and has announced plans for 18 more AZs and 6 more AWS regions. So that would be in Australia, India, Indonesia, Japan, Spain and Switzerland. That is the future plan. So AZs and regions I'll be explaining to you in the next few slides. So AZs are basically like data centers. Regions are the geographic area, you can say a country or a continent. So you can see here in the third point I mentioned the same thing. In 2019, the revenue that was generated by AWS was $35 billion, right? So you can see that there is great growth in the business for AWS, and there is basically good demand in the IT environment, right? And this is actually the Gartner Magic Quadrant of 2019. wherein you can see that AWS was the leader in IaaS, infra as a service, with 45% share of the whole market. And also Microsoft and Google, you can see in the leaders, and others are there as well in the niche players like Alibaba Cloud, IBM, Oracle. They're also, launching new services every day. AWS is way ahead of Microsoft, Azure, Alibaba, Google, and IBM, no doubt. And AWS was named as a leader in Gartner Infrastructure as a Service Magic Quadrant for the 9th consecutive year in 2019 and 2020. Also, they are the leaders. So it's been 10 years consecutively. And this is about the AWS Global Infrastructure. So I will be explaining to you a brief about the AWS regions. I have, in the next slide also, I have the regions shown on the global map. But region is basically a geographical area with 2 or more AZs. So each region will have a minimum of 2 AZs isolated from other AWS regions. So these AZs or these regions will be isolated from other regions as well, so that if something happens to an AZ in one region, should not affect another AZ in another region, right? So that is the whole idea, to make it redundant, and so that if one AZ goes down, the users will not be affected, so they will be routed to another AZ. Another AZ will be there to serve their needs. And then AZ is one or more data centers that are physically separate and isolated from other AZs. Again, AZs are also separated from other AZs in the same region, but one AZ, inside one AZ, you can have one or more data centers. It's not like one data center is equal to one AZ. No, you can have multiple data centers within an AZ, and then multiple AZs, more than 2 basically, in one region. Okay. Then comes the edge location. Edge location is basically a cache of content that can be it's part of the cloud front. A location with a cache of content that can be delivered at low latency to the users. So the content that is being accessed regularly is cached in these locations, and then the users are served from these edge locations rather than going to the AZs, so that the latency, the users will feel low latency. Next is the regional edge cache. Also, this is part of the CloudFront network, and these are larger caches that sit between AWS services and edge locations. So basically, just you can think that them as a bigger bigger edge locations or bigger caches, right? So you can think them as a parent edge locations. And then you have the global network. Global network is basically the backplane and the highly available, low latency private global network interconnecting every data center, AZ and AWS regions. So these are basically, you can think them as the lease lines. So these are the connections that go between the AZs and the regions to keep them connected. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide. So in this next slide, you can see the AWS global infrastructure map, and you can see all over the globe how many regions you have, and there are more to come. So you can see the blue ones are already online and the orange are in the planning. Yeah. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is basically about the AWS regions. An AWS region is a geographical area. Each region consists of 2 or more AZs, so you need to remember that. Each Amazon region is designed to be completely isolated from the other Amazon region. Even the AZs are designed like that, but physically they are separated, but via network they are connected. The separation is because of the reason that if something happens to that building or to that AZ, say there was a fire or some natural disaster, that should not affect the other AZ. So that is the main, the reason is actually high availability. So let's go on to the next slide for the AZs. So what are AWS availability zones? Availability zones, as I said, are locations into which you are into which you launch resources such as Amazon EC2. So these are the actual data center where the hardware, the rack is set up, you have the switches in there, you have the servers where you will launch those Amazon EC2 instances. So you select in the dashboard which region or which AZ you want to which region you want to launch your EC2 instance. And AZs are basically the DCs, and DCs have all the hardware inside, the racks, the servers, right? The VMs where you launch. So EC2 is like in VM on the cloud. AZs are physically separate and isolated from each other, as I said earlier, physically. But through cabling they are connected, networking. AZs span one or more data centers and have direct low latency, high throughput and network connections between each other. So AZs are physically separate, but they are connected via the low latency and high throughput and redundant networks. Each AZ is designed as an independent failure zone. As I said, one AZ fails, it will not affect the other AZs in that region. AZs are physically separated within a typical metropolitan region and use discrete power source, so they will be running on separate power sources. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, which is the AWS global infrastructure. So just with this example, I just want to explain to you what are AZs again and what are regions. So you can just think of this. Okay, I just move to the next slide. Let me just go back. Yeah, so let me take the pen. So this is like, this one is a region in US East, and you can see you have 1, 2 and 3 availability zones in that region. Okay, and this region is completely separate from this region as well as this region, and these AZs are separate from each other physically, so they are far off from each other in that region. Likewise, you have another AZ in AP South, AZ region, and inside that you have again 1, 2 and 3 AZs which are separate from each other, and this region is separate from other regions, separated. Likewise, you have another region in Europe West, again 1, 2 and 3 AZs. Likewise, they are separate from each other, but they are actually directly connected through the low latency and high throughput network of AWS, right? So that is the thing that I wanted to explain to you with this diagram. Each region is completely independent, that's what I said, and there are 24 regions around the world as of now. Okay, so hope that clears the concept of region and AZs. Let's move on to the next slide, that is the AWS services in scope. So Amazon Web Services have, so there are plenty of services, but these are the few services that we will be covering in the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. So you have the IAM, AWS Identity and Access Management. This is like a network access control. So you will have all the users, user policies, user roles, everything defined here, and you will be authenticated and authorized after the IAM grants you access to the services. And then you have the compute where you have Amazon EC2, you have Amazon ECS, Elastic Compute Service, and then you have Lambda, you have the Light Sail, you have next is storage. Inside storage we'll go through Amazon S3, which is basically again a cloud storage service. Then you have EBS, and you have EFS, Amazon, and then you have AWS Gateway, storage gateway. And then in networking, you have the VPC, the most important thing for networking, and then you have AWS Direct Connect. It's like a VPN from AWS. And then you have in database, you have the relational database service, RDS. Then you have Amazon DynamoDB, and you have Amazon Redshift, and what else? You have the Elastic Cache inside database. And then the load balancing and auto scaling, you have Elastic Load Balancer and the auto scaling concepts. We will go through this one by one, and also I'll try to cover some labs. Then inside the content delivery and DNS section, you have Amazon Route 53, the DNS service from Amazon, and the Amazon CloudFront and then you have the monitoring and logging services. You have Amazon Cloud Watch and Cloud Trail for that. And the notifications is Amazon SNS, simple notification service. And then for migration and transfer, you have database migration services, and then you have server migration services and AWS Snowball. And there's one more thing that is called the Snowmobile. I don't think that is here, but I'll be explaining a little bit about it. So then you have the cloud governance and security. Inside that we have the guard duty, we have the KMS, key management services, and then you have the WAF and your shield. And then you have the cloud SM, HSM, artifacts, inspector, trusted advisor, AWS config and service catalog, and the last one is the AWS personal health dashboard. So these are the services that we will be going through, and some of the services are global in nature and some are regional. So in the next slide I have tried to explain and show you the global services as well as the regional services. So the red ones here are the global services. As you can see, Amazon IAM is a global service, S3 is a global service, but there's a catch. I'll just explain to you later in a later slide. And then the Amazon Direct Connect is a global service, Route 53 again a global service, Amazon CloudFront a global service, WAF Shield, Artifact, Trusted Advisor, AWS Health Dashboard is again global service. Apart from that, all other ones in the blue are the regional services. So you if you run an Amazon EC2 instance in one region and then you change your region to that to another region, you will not see those EC2 instances. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so in this slide I actually wanted to just explain to you about the global services. So the example is about the IAM. So you are a user that is residing in the New York office, right? And then there's another office in Dublin. But this guy Mark, okay, Mark is authenticating to the IAM, and the after authorization and authentication, he gets access to the Amazon EC2 instance in US East. And then what happens is he is traveling from New York to Dublin, and inside Dublin he is again authenticating to the IAM, which is a global service, and he gets authenticated, and then he has access to the Amazon EC2 instances in both the regions. Okay, so that is how it is. So you don't need to configure the IAM in different regions. You configure it once globally, and then you will have access to all the other services globally or even regionally. So let's move on to the next slide. So this slide actually explains to you the regional services. So here you can see the regional services are the EC2 instances. So if you are running a EC2 instance, say you are running one EC2 instance in region US East 1, you are running a web server and you are running an RDS service. So these two, 1 and 2, are both what they are regional services. Okay, and then you have the S3. S3 actually is a global service, but the catch is when you create a bucket is basically where you store all your data. That is actually regional. So you create these buckets within a region. Okay, so that is the catch that I was talking about. You should remember this. Even though the S3 is a global service, but the bucket that you create is regional service, right? Let's move on to the next slide. So this slide actually explains about the fundamentals of AWS pricing model. So the first thing is that if you are running any compute service, whether it be AWS, EC2, EMR, RDS or Lambda, you will be paying for the duration that you run those EC2 instances and those virtual machines, right? So you will be paying for that duration. And then if you are running any storage service, also you will be paying for those data, right? But the catch here is the upload, right? The data that you upload to AWS, is not charged. Okay, not charged. So you don't need to pay for what you upload, but the data that you are pulling from AWS services or downloading anything, for that you have to pay. So that is what I have, it's written over here, that outbound data transfer is aggregated across services and then charged at the outbound data transfer rate. So that you need to remember. Let's move on to the next slide. So this is about the AWS pricing models. So the AWS pricing model is quite flexible. So first thing is on demand. So if you don't want any VM to be running, so you shut it down and you don't need to pay any penny for that. But when you when the demands are high, so you go and run EC2 instance, launch an EC2 instance, you create a database, and then on demand is actually used for compute and database capacity. So you pay for that particular infrastructure that you are using, and for that particular period only. No long-term commitments or upfront payments. So then you have dedicated instances. Dedicated instances are actually instances that that are launched on a dedicated hardware. Okay, so you have a server. Basically, what happens is, so they have a server which is very beefy, right? But what happens is this is actually multi-tenant, or you can say multi-user. So multiple clients access this server and they create their VMs on this server. So this is a shared resource. So that's why it's it costs you less, But if you go for a dedicated instance, that means this whole server is yours, right? Nobody else's VM will be created on this server. So for that, the hardware is dedicated, but you will be charged more, right, for this type of service. And then you have the spot instances. So these are basically the resources that are not utilized in the AWS infrastructure. So they provide that on great discount until there is no demand. But once there is a demand, they can just take it out from your association. Okay, so if you are running any VMs and all, that will be taken out. So just think of this, but because it gives you a huge discount on this, but it is basically when they have huge infrastructure that is sitting idle, they just go and provide great discount on those. But this is not persistent, so they can take it anytime. So just keep that in mind. Then you have reservations. Again, when you go for reservations, you get great discount because you commit to AWS that you are going to use these resources for a particular period of time, say from 1 to 3 years, right? So you will again get up to 75% discount on that reservation. So again, if you are thinking for a long-term solution, that is the best thing to do. And let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we will be talking about the reservations. As I said, 1 to 3 years, right? So that is mentioned here. Options for 1 to 3 years term. Options to pay are no upfront. You cannot. You can go for no upfront. You can go for a partial upfront, or you can go for all upfront. So you have a great flexibility here. Okay, and then you have these services that are you can opt for the reservations, right? So if you want reservations, these are the only services that you get under reservations. You have the EC2, you have the DynamoDB, you have the Elasticache, you have the RDS, you have the Redshift. So you can go for the reservations on these services. Okay, so that's it for section 3. Next is IAM. In section 4, I'll be again recording a new video for that. So that's it for now, everyone. But if you like the way I teach and like the content that I have on my channel, please do subscribe to my channel, share, and comment as much as possible. Thank you guys. See you again next time. Bye bye.